I remember that morning like it was yesterday. The sun was soft through the glass towers, and the city was just starting to wake. I walked into the office with my usual black coffee, thinking about the report I'd stayed up late finishing. 7 years. That's how long I'd given this company. 7 years of ideas, long nights, and quiet loyalty. I wasn't the loudest voice in the room, but people listened when I spoke. Or at least, they used to. Before I tell you how I got my revenge, hit that like button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped out, still half thinking about the upcoming $600 million deal everyone had been whispering about. My phone buzzed. Urgent, 9 a.m. meeting with the CEO. No greeting. No reason. Just that. My chest tightened a little. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a last-minute update before the board meeting. But as I walked down the hall, I noticed how people avoided my eyes. Some smiled too quickly. Some didn't look at all. Something in me knew this wasn't just another meeting. I took a deep breath and whispered, "You've handled worse, Kim." At 9:12 a.m., I was about to find out just how wrong I was. The CEO's office was colder than usual that morning. Maybe it was the air conditioning, or maybe it was the way he didn't look up when I walked in. His nameplate gleamed on the desk, Mr. Callan Wright, the man who built his empire on charm and control. "Sit down, Kim," he said, flipping through a folder. His tone was smooth, too smooth. I sat, clutching my notebook. "Is this about the Archon deal?" I asked. That was the $600 million project I'd led from day one, the one that could double our company's size. He finally looked up. "You've done good work," he said. "But the board's decided to go in a different direction." My stomach dropped. "You're firing me?" "It's a restructuring," he said, smiling like it made it better. Effective immediately. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. After everything I built? He closed the folder. "It's just business, Kim." That phrase, "just business," was his favorite excuse for cruelty. I stood up slowly. "You'll regret this," I said, not as a threat, but as truth. He chuckled. "Doubt it. If you like our revenge stories, please subscribe for more. We drop powerful news stories every week, filled with truth, emotion, and justice. Don't miss the next one. And remember, some stories hurt, but they heal too. Subscribe now, and join the journey." At 9:12 a.m., I walked out carrying nothing but my dignity, and a secret he didn't know I had. When I stepped out of the glass office, my badge was already disabled. The security guard wouldn't meet my eyes as I handed it over. My hands were steady, but inside, I was shaking. I should have cried. I should have begged. But I didn't. Because what Callan Wright didn't know was that I'd been keeping copies, clean, time-stamped, undeniable copies, of every document tied to the Archon deal. 2 months ago, I started noticing adjustments in the reports, hidden payments, inflated expenses, and off-the-record meetings with a foreign contractor we weren't supposed to touch. I brought it up once in a meeting, and Callan smiled that politician smile. "Leave the details to me," he'd said. So I did what any smart woman in a room full of secrets would do. I started saving everything. Emails, invoices, voice memos. Even his late-night messages. He thought firing me erased his problem. But he'd just released it. By 10:15 a.m., I was home in my apartment, my laptop glowing in the dim light. I opened the encrypted folder labeled Project Ember, and there it was, every piece of proof. By 11:22 a.m., someone very important was about to see it. I sat at my kitchen table, the steam from my untouched coffee curling into the air. My laptop screen glowed with everything I wasn't supposed to have, the truth. For a few minutes, I just stared at it. My mind replayed every late night, every "good job, Kim," every empty promise of a promotion that never came. I had built that $600 million deal from scratch, and Callan Wright had taken the credit, and now, my job. But he had also taken one risk too many. At 10:38 a.m., I opened a new email. My hands didn't shake this time. The subject line was simple. Urgent, compliance review, Archon project. The recipient, Internal Corporate Affairs, the department Callan feared most. I attached the folder, every file neatly organized and verified. Before I pressed send, I hesitated, not because I doubted what I was doing, but because I knew what it meant. This wasn't revenge. It was justice. At 10:42 a.m., I hit send. I closed my laptop, exhaled, and whispered, "Now we wait." Somewhere in that shining glass tower, alarms were already starting to ring, and by 11:22 a.m., his biggest deal would be burning. At 10:58 a.m., my phone rang. The number flashed across the screen, Corporate Affairs Division. My pulse quickened. "Ms. Andrew?" The voice on the line was calm, professional, but serious. "This is Director Elena Moore. We received your message and documents regarding the Archon project." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I managed. I only sent what I believed the board needed to see. There was a pause. "You did the right thing," she said. "Can we confirm that these reports came directly from CEO Callan Wright's office?" "Yes," I replied softly. "Most of them were emailed by him or edited under his authorization." "Check the timestamps." I heard quiet typing in the background. Then, "Thank you, Ms. Andrew. We'll handle it from here." When the call ended, I sat still, listening to the quiet hum of my apartment. The clock read 11:07 a.m. Outside, the city kept moving, cars, horns, life, unaware that inside a glass skyscraper, a $600 million deal was starting to collapse. My phone buzzed again. A message from a friend still inside the office. "Kim, something's happening. They've frozen the merger files." I smiled for the first time that morning. "It's starting," I whispered. While I sat in my quiet apartment, miles away, the world inside Wright Global was cracking. My friend, Mia, kept sending short, panicked texts. They called an emergency meeting. "Legal's here. Callan looks furious." I could almost see it, Callan Wright pacing at the head of the table, his perfect composure slipping. The man who once controlled every room now had no idea where the fire had started. At 11:18 a.m., another message came. "Compliance just flagged the Archon deal. They said there's a breach of regulation." I leaned back in my chair. That was the phrase I'd been waiting for. Breach of regulation. Once that was said aloud, the board had no choice but to act. Somewhere between the reports and the hidden payments, Callan had crossed a line, and I had just handed them the proof. By 11:22 a.m., the boardroom was in full chaos. Mia's last text read. "They're pausing the $600 million deal. Everything's under review." I closed my eyes and let out a slow breath. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth catching up, and it always does, no matter how powerful someone thinks they are. By noon, the news had already spread across the building. Wright Global's $600 million Archon deal was officially under review. My phone buzzed non-stop, messages from coworkers who once stayed silent. "Kim, what's going on? Did you know about this? The CEO's losing it." I didn't reply. Instead, I watched from my window as clouds began to roll over the skyline, dark and heavy, like the storm brewing in that boardroom. Callan Wright had always said, "Control the story, and you control the truth." But he never understood that facts have a way of writing their own ending. I thought about the moment he fired me, his smug tone, his practiced smile. "It's just business," he'd said. Maybe it was. But business goes both ways. I poured myself another coffee and turned on the news. A headline scrolled across the screen. Wright Global merger faces internal investigation, CEO silent. I smiled faintly. Sometimes, silence is the loudest sound in the room. And for the first time in years, I felt something strange, peace. Not because I'd won, but because I finally remembered who I was before I started fighting to please people like him. When I went back to the office that afternoon to collect my things, the air felt different, tense, uneasy, almost afraid. The receptionist, who usually greeted me with a bright smile, just nodded quietly. No one asked questions. Everyone already knew. My desk sat near the window, the same spot where I'd spent countless hours chasing perfection. Every photo, every sticky note, every late-night coffee stain carried pieces of who I used to be. I opened a small cardboard box and started packing slowly. My favorite pen. The notebook full of sketches for the Archon project. A framed quote my mother gave me, "Integrity is doing the right thing, even when no one's watching." For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness. I had loved this place once, before it turned cold. As I sealed the box, I noticed Callan's office door shut tight, blinds drawn. I didn't need to see him to know he was watching. I lifted the box and walked toward the elevator, each step lighter than the last. They took my badge, my title, my desk, but not my name. And when that elevator closed, I knew I wasn't walking away defeated. I was walking free. That night, I couldn't sleep. The city outside my window buzzed with life, but inside, my mind replayed every word from that morning. The look on Callan's face. The silence in the room. The way my name had suddenly become something people whispered. I could have walked away. Found another job. Pretended none of it happened. But deep down, I knew something. If I stayed quiet, men like Callan would keep doing this. They'd keep winning off other people's silence. At 2:14 a.m., I sat at my desk again, the glow of my laptop lighting the room. The folder labeled Project Ember blinked on the screen like a heartbeat. Inside it was truth, clean, solid, and undeniable. I whispered to myself, "You didn't ruin his deal, Kim. He did that himself." That's when I made my choice. I wasn't going to disappear. I was going to stand in my own story, even if no one believed it yet. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was accountability. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. For the first time in months, I felt calm, like I'd finally stepped out of a storm and realized I was still standing. The next morning, I opened Project Ember again. Each folder was neatly labeled, every document a piece of a puzzle Callan thought no one would ever solve. There were payment trails that didn't match the budget sheets. Contracts signed under different names. And buried deep inside an encrypted folder, a string of emails between Callan and a broker in another country. The kind of messages that could destroy reputations. As I scrolled, I remembered the night I first noticed the inconsistencies. It had been late, almost midnight. I'd stayed behind to finish quarterly reports while the rest of the team celebrated upstairs. That was when I saw the missing numbers. I thought it was a mistake. Now I knew better. I organized everything into a timeline, clear, factual, impossible to deny. Then I saved a copy to a flash drive and another to the cloud. My hands trembled, but not from fear. From purpose. Callan had once told me, details are what make people powerful. He was right. By noon, the files were ready. If the board ever questioned my integrity, I'd have proof. The truth was no longer his to hide. It was mine to reveal, carefully, and at the right time. By early afternoon, I found something I hadn't noticed before, a missing file. The environmental compliance report, required for every major merger, wasn't there. It should have been submitted weeks ago, but the system showed no record of it. I frowned, digging deeper into the archives. Every other project had one, except Archon. That was strange. The report was critical. Without it, the deal couldn't legally move forward. Then I remembered an email from 3 weeks ago. Callan had written, "No need to worry about that file. I'll handle it personally." At the time, I hadn't questioned it. Now, it made perfect sense. He never filed it. I searched the company's digital trail again and finally found a draft, half finished and unsigned. The last edit timestamp? Callan Wright. He hadn't handled it. He'd hidden it. I sat back in my chair, my pulse quick but steady. The missing report wasn't just a mistake, it was evidence. Without it, the merger wasn't just under review. It was at risk of being cancelled altogether. I saved the file and whispered, "There it is." The truth had always been there, waiting for the right person to notice it. At exactly 10:05 a.m. the next morning, I made the call. My fingers hovered over the keypad for a long moment before I pressed dial. "Corporate Affairs, this is Director Moore," a calm voice answered. "It's Kim Andrew," I said quietly. "I have information about the Archon project, specifically, about a missing environmental compliance report." There was silence on the other end, followed by the sound of quick typing. "Go on," she said, her tone shifting. I explained what I'd found, the missing report, the false signatures, the timeline. I told her how the CEO had said he'd handle it personally. When I finished, she spoke carefully. "Ms. Andrew, this information could change everything. Can you send documentation?" "It's ready," I said. "Clean, verified, time-stamped." Another pause. "You understand what you're doing could trigger a full internal review?" "I understand," I replied. "But it's the right thing." Her voice softened. "Then send it to me directly. We'll take it from here." As I hung up, I realized I wasn't scared anymore. The moment my email left the outbox, the countdown began, not for me, but for Callan Wright. And he had no idea what was coming. I was sitting by my window with my second cup of coffee when my phone started lighting up. Notifications. Mentions. A message from Mia. "Kim, what did you do?" "They're reviewing the Archon files." I didn't reply. I just watched the sunlight reflect off the nearby towers, calm, steady, like the moment before a storm breaks. In less than 15 minutes, the company's entire internal network buzzed with the same alert. Archon project, compliance review in progress. All communications paused until further notice. That one sentence was enough to stop everything. Meetings frozen. Emails suspended. Executives whispering in hallways, trying to guess who'd triggered it. I imagined Callan's face when the news reached him, the sharp flash of anger, the confusion, the scramble to find someone to blame. He'd look everywhere but at himself. The truth doesn't knock politely. It breaks the door open. By 11 a.m., the story was spreading fast. People were saying the board had stepped in. Others said government auditors were being looped in. I leaned back and smiled. The review had begun, and there was no stopping it now. By 11:06 a.m., my phone buzzed again, this time, a single message from Mia. "He's losing it, Kim." Callan's yelling at everyone. I pictured the scene perfectly. The boardroom blinds shut tight. Assistants scrambling. Lawyers dialing into emergency calls. Callan Wright standing at the center, his perfect control cracking for the first time. He'd built his reputation on confidence, the kind that made people afraid to question him. But fear is fragile. Once it breaks, it never comes back. At 11:15 a.m., Mia sent another text. "He's demanding to know who leaked the files. They're saying it came from inside the system." Of course it did. I'd sent everything through official channels. No leaks. No tricks. Just facts, the kind that spoke louder than any excuse. I could imagine his voice, sharp and desperate. "Find out who did this." But the truth was already out. The board had seen enough to freeze the merger, and compliance had opened an investigation. For years, Callan had made me feel small, replaceable. But now, every decision he'd made was under a microscope. And for the first time, he couldn't fire the problem away. By early afternoon, the story wasn't just inside the company anymore, it had escaped. At 1:27 p.m., a news alert popped up on my phone. Major compliance review hits Wright Global's $600 million Archon deal. It didn't mention names, but anyone who knew the company could guess what it meant. The media didn't need details, they just needed a spark. And I had given them one without saying a single word. A minute later, Mia texted again. Someone from finance leaked that the issue came from Callan's office. He's blaming everyone but himself. I could almost hear his voice echoing through the walls, sharp, defensive, full of panic. The man who once spoke in polished quotes now barked orders that made no sense. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd built a company on image, on smooth words and power lunches. Now, one missing report, and a few unedited emails, were tearing it all apart. I turned off my phone and leaned back, watching the city move below. It wasn't about humiliation or payback. It was about truth doing what truth always does, finding the light, no matter how deep someone tries to bury it. By the next morning, everything had changed. The news spread faster than any memo ever could. Right Global's board was in emergency session, and the word suspension was being whispered in every corner. Mia called me, her voice low and shaky. Kim, you won't believe this. They've stripped Callan of his signing authority. The board's taken over the Archon deal. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just stared out the window, the sunlight catching the edge of my coffee cup. The city looked the same, calm, routine, but I knew the power balance had shifted. He's fighting it, Mia added. But no one's listening to him anymore. They're all trying to save themselves. The irony hit me hard. For years, Callan had made decisions that ruined others while protecting himself. Now, every one of his allies was stepping back, pretending they'd never stood beside him. Thank you, Mia, I said softly. For letting me know. After we hung up, I opened my email. A new message blinked at the top of my inbox. Subject, request for discussion, from the board of Right Global. I stared at it for a long moment. The same people who'd ignored me yesterday were finally ready to listen. The email from Right Global's board was polite, almost too polite. Dear Ms. Andrew, we'd appreciate an opportunity to speak with you regarding recent developments in the Archon project. I read it twice, then a third time. The same board that had watched me get dismissed without a word was suddenly calling me Ms. Andrew, with respect. At 3:10 p.m., I joined the video call. 6 faces appeared on screen, nervous, professional, careful. One of the directors cleared his throat. Kim, first, we owe you an apology. It seems, certain information was kept from us. I kept my voice calm. Yes. By your CEO. Another director leaned forward. The evidence you provided was detailed. It prevented a potential violation that could have cost this company everything. So you're saying firing me was a mistake? I asked gently. A few awkward glances passed between them. We'd like to make it right, the chairwoman said. Consulting position. Your rate, your terms. For a moment, I just sat there, letting the silence stretch. I smiled. Thank you. I'll think about it. When the meeting ended, I closed my laptop slowly. They didn't want justice. They wanted silence, and that was something they'd never buy from me. I didn't take their offer. The old me might have, the version of Kim who still believed loyalty would protect her. But that woman was gone. Instead, I opened a new document on my laptop and typed the words, Andrew Consulting Group. It felt unreal at first, starting from nothing. But as the weeks passed, things began to move faster than I expected. People reached out. Former clients, colleagues, even quiet voices from inside Right Global. They didn't want to work for Callan anymore. They wanted to work with me. My first project came from a small firm that valued honesty more than titles. They told me, we need someone who can clean up corporate chaos. I laughed softly. That's my specialty. I rented a tiny office with peeling paint and one good window. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every morning, I brewed my own coffee and set my own schedule. Freedom had a sound, the quiet click of my keyboard, unhurried and calm. Sometimes, I'd glance at the skyline where Wright Global's building stood, gleaming and distant. I didn't feel bitterness anymore. Just clarity. He fired me at 9:12 a.m., but that was the moment my real career began. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, 2 months after the review started. My new office was quiet except for the hum of my old computer when my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen since that day, Callan Wright. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. Then, curiosity won. I answered. "Kim," he said, his voice softer than I remembered. I wanted to talk. There was hesitation in his tone, the kind that comes when power starts to fade. "I assume this isn't a business call," I said calmly. He sighed. "The board forced me to step down. The deal's dead. The media twisted everything. I didn't expect you to go that far." I leaned back in my chair. "Far? I told the truth, Callan. That's all." "You could have come to me," he said quietly. I almost laughed. "I did. You fired me." Silence stretched across the line. Then, softer, he said, "I never thought you'd do this to me." "No," I replied, steady and calm. "You did this to yourself." I ended the call and stared at my reflection in the window. For the first time, his voice didn't hold any power over me. The next morning, Callan sent an email. The subject line read, "Foreclosure." I opened it, unsure why I even cared to read. His message was long, a mixture of excuses, regrets, and self-pity dressed as apology. He wrote about pressure from investors, the stress of leadership, how he had no choice. He ended it with, "I hope one day you'll understand." I stared at the blinking cursor, thinking about the years I'd spent believing that understanding made pain easier to carry. It didn't. So I wrote back. "Callan. I don't hate you. I just finally see you clearly. You fired me to protect yourself, not the company. But the truth doesn't disappear just because someone powerful says it should. I don't need revenge or recognition. I just need peace. I wish you'd treated me with respect when it mattered most. Kim." I reread it once, then hit send. No anger, no venom, just truth. Minutes later, he replied with 2 words, "You've changed." I smiled faintly at the screen. He was wrong. I hadn't changed. I'd simply stopped shrinking to fit inside his version of respect. By Monday morning, the company was chaos. Headlines everywhere, Callan Industries under federal review. Investors were pulling out. The $600 million deal, his legacy project, was frozen pending investigation. Every message board, every news clip had his name trending for all the wrong reasons. I didn't gloat. Not really. There was no victory dance, no champagne. Just silence, calm and heavy, like the air after a storm finally passes. Friends from the company texted me non-stop. "Kim, you were right. He's losing everything. They should have listened to you." I didn't respond. I wasn't interested in gossip or karma keeping score. That afternoon, I drove past the glass tower that once held my office. Security stood outside, escorting out men in suits. For a second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. He'd built an empire on loyalty and lies. And now, both were collapsing, quietly, painfully, completely. I parked across the street, watching the building shimmer in the autumn light. A part of me whispered, "You could have saved him." But another voice, steadier, stronger, answered, "He never wanted saving." I started the engine and drove away, leaving the wreckage behind me for good. 3 days later, a small white envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, just my name written in looping, familiar handwriting. Inside was a single page. It was from Tara, Callan's former assistant, the only person in that office who ever treated me like more than a stepping stone. "Kim. I don't know if this will make a difference, but I wanted you to know, you were right. The deal they fired you over? It was dirty from the start. Callan knew the reports were falsified. You were supposed to take the fall if it went south. After you left, everything unraveled. The board's investigating now. People are scared, but most of us, we're grateful. You exposed something bigger than anyone realized. You didn't lose, Kim. You walked away before the fire started. Take care of yourself. Tara. I held the letter for a long time, feeling the weight of every word. It wasn't vindication I felt, it was clarity. For years, I'd mistaken endurance for loyalty. Now, I understood, walking away wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. I folded the letter and placed it gently in my journal, not as proof, but as closure. Spring came quietly that year, softer mornings, slower days. My little office had grown busier, the air filled with quiet energy and the scent of fresh coffee. Andrew Consulting wasn't just surviving anymore. It was thriving. Every new client came from word of mouth. Companies tired of corruption, leaders searching for integrity instead of intimidation. I didn't have to chase opportunities, they found me. Mia joined my team full-time. On her first day, she walked in with a grin and 2 paper cups. You realize this is poetic, right? We used to survive his chaos, now we run our own calm. I laughed. Guess peace really is the best revenge. In the afternoons, we'd sit by the window, planning projects that mattered. No manipulation, no fear. Just purpose. One evening, as I locked up the office, I looked at the sign on the door, my name etched in gold lettering. Simple. Honest. Mine. I thought about everything that had happened, the firing, the review, the wreckage. And for the first time, I didn't see pain when I looked back. I saw a rebuild, not of a career, but of a person. And this time, the foundation was unbreakable. It started with a phone call from a journalist named Elena Cruz. Her voice was warm, professional, curious. Ms. Andrew, she said, I'm writing a feature on corporate integrity. Your name keeps coming up. Would you be open to an interview? I hesitated. I'd spent months avoiding the spotlight, content to let the story fade. But something in her tone told me this wasn't about gossip. It was about truth told right. We met at a small cafe downtown. No cameras, no bright lights, just 2 cups of coffee and a notebook. Elena asked softly, how did it feel, being fired and then watching the company fall apart? I smiled faintly. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like freedom. She nodded, scribbling notes. Do you have any regrets? Only that I stayed quiet for so long, I said. Sometimes silence protects the wrong people. When the article came out, it wasn't scandalous or bitter. The headline read, "The woman who chose truth over power, and won her life back." I read it once, then tucked the paper into my drawer. For the first time in years, my story wasn't being told about me. It was being told by me. A year to the day after I was fired, I stood outside Wright Global's headquarters again. The same glass doors. The same polished floors. But everything felt smaller now, or maybe I'd just grown. The company had new leadership, new slogans about transparency and trust. The irony made me smile. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for a meeting. My firm had been hired as an independent ethics consultant. When I stepped inside, the receptionist greeted me politely, not recognizing me. "Welcome, Ms. Andrew. The board is expecting you." I walked through the same hall where security once escorted me out. Back then, I'd left with a box of my things and a bruised sense of worth. Now, I carried only a notebook and calm confidence. In the boardroom, the new chairwoman stood to shake my hand. "We're grateful you agreed to help us rebuild, Kim." I nodded. "Let's make sure you never repeat your past mistakes." As I looked out over the city skyline, sunlight streamed through the windows, bright and steady. They had fired me at 9:12 a.m., thinking they'd ended my story. But by 11:22 a.m., the truth had already begun to write a better one. And this time, I held the pen. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more powerful narratives, and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what part hit you the hardest. Thanks for watching.